Welcome, writers, readers, and friends to the Authors Talking Bookish podcast. I'm Donna Norman Carbone, author of All That Is Sacred.
And I'm Hope Gibbs, author of Where the Grass Grows Blue.
We're two debut writers traditionally published by a small publishing house, bringing to you all the experiences that we as authors learn the hard way, so you don't have to.
We'll give you insights from the inception of a book idea to publication and beyond. And along the way, we'll share our love of books from the writer's perspective.
Hello, friends. Welcome back. This is episode 21, Editing and Revision, the advice you didn't know you needed. I'm Donna Carbone, and I am joined by Hope Gibbs. Hi, Hope.
Hey, Donna. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. It's, spring is here, warm weather. I'm thrilled for the sun. It was kind of a cold and dreary winter and spring, but now we're getting close to summer and I'm so excited.
Yeah, it was here too. It's been just so gray and rainy. I'm happy to have the sun in the sky, which looks
Absolutely.
like a foreign object right now.
So how's it been going? Because right now you are in the thick of launching book number 2. Tell us a little bit about what's it like with book 2. I'm so excited to hear more.
I don't know. It's interesting. I keep equating it to the birthing process. And when you have your first child, you just can't wait for the next step and the next step. And then the second child, it's like, slow down, wait. I don't want to experience this so soon. So I'm really just trying to savor the moments, which I think I am because I'm a lot more prepared this time.
Yeah.
So yeah, launch day was fun. I have a lot of scheduled events in May. May is a very busy month for me, but all good. I got my Kirkus review, which I was waiting for and very nervous about. But it came out. It was a good review. I was super excited about the genres that they put me in. They put me in literary fiction and family life and friendship fiction. So I think that those are appropriate.
And you also, I just put up a graphic, you also won an award, your first one for this one.
I did. You know what? I thought I would send one of my galley copies before it even got published. And yeah, I was so pleased to get that award. So my book baby's doing well. How are you doing?
Good. I've just been busy doing a lot of speaking engagements. So I was invited to speak up in Kentucky at an arts council. I spoke at a library here in Nashville for the AD Alumni Association. Was featured in another newspaper, and then went to Alabama to speak to an adult learning class. So I've been more on the speaking and promoting tour than actually writing.
That's okay. And I saw that you were reading there. That was your first reading, wasn't it?
It was. I have spoken to a lot of different groups and book clubs, but I had never read a passage from my book, and I wrote it. But I have to say, I was more nervous about reading than speaking. I spoke for 40 minutes with no notes. I just had my PowerPoint. But that was the one thing that intimidated me, was to actually read a passage from my book.
Yeah, but you got through it, right?
I did.
I was very nervous about that too. I had to do that months ago at a library talk that I went to. They asked me to read, and I was so nervous about it. So I totally get where you're coming from. But I think once you go through it once, you'll be fine.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of books, what have you just been reading, or something that you're currently reading right now?
So I just finished reading The Visitor by C. D'Angelo, who is a friend of both of ours. And it was a delightful, lighthearted, heartwarming book about a woman who owns a new age store. And the people who own the building, not only where she lives, but where her store is selling. And so her whole life seems to be crashing down around her, and she's trying to hang on to her store and her livelihood. It's really good. Yeah.
That sounds very interesting. So I was asked to do an author blurb for this book called Soul Dancing by Gail Priest. And I have to say, it is one of the most unique concepts. I'm not giving anything away because it starts out at the very beginning. You're in a hospice room with a 90-year-old woman, and she's dying, and her husband is by her side. And when she passes, instead of going on to another place, you don't know quite where, she resists because she's so worried about leaving him. So she pulls away from someone who is supposed to take her to the light. And the
Mhm.
next thing you know, she wakes up and she's in the middle of giving birth to a baby. And so this
Oh,
90 woman is in the body of a woman. And so it's almost like a second chance of do-over with, being a mother. But then she
mhm.
also has her husband who she's totally devoted to. And I loved it. Every time I would go to a different chapter, I was like, wow, this is a really unique way of, kind of that the trope of, if you could do your life over again or if you got a second chance. And so I just love it. And also getting a chance to do an author blurb, it's an honor to be asked. And, when authors did that for me, it I cannot tell you how helpful that was. So I'm glad I'm getting to kind of pay it forward to some more writers.
That's awesome. I too ordered Gail Priest's book, and I'm so excited to read it. I love the title, I love the cover, I love the premise, everything about it.
Yeah.
Right up my alley.
Yes. Well, let's talk today about this podcast because this was something that we both learned the hard way. So,
Yeah.
Donna, do you want to tell us what we're going to discuss today?
Sure. We're going to talk about editing and revision. We're going to talk about different kinds of editing and revision and some advice, different methods of revision that you can use. Not all of them will be something that resonates with you. I think the methods of editing and revision are very personal and distinct to the writer, but we're going to throw some ideas out there and see what catches.
Yeah. So the first thing is you have a manuscript of your first draft. And I don't care who you are, your first draft is not going to be perfect. It's not going to be pretty. Your concept, your hook, your story is still there, but it is a very, very different book once you go through all these stages. So the first big, what we would call revising, is called content editing. Donna, tell us what content editing is.
Sure. Content editing is also called developmental editing. So you might hear those terms interchanged, but that's big picture stuff. That is moving chapters around, removing scenes, adding scenes, removing characters. So it's big picture changes. And when you get with a publisher or with an editor, they're not going to focus on the details yet. They're not going to focus on the things like line by line edits. They're just going to look at big picture
Yeah.
details. Yeah.
So I don't know about you, Donna. When I wrote my book, I've said that I'm not a trained writer, and so a lot of my story came through with content edits. I knew that I couldn't, try to find a publisher or an agent in the shape that my manuscript was in. So I hired an independent content editor to help me get
Mhm.
it ready for that next step of finding a home for my book. So that's what I did. And I was really surprised because I was kind of naive. I thought, oh, they're going to take my book and edit it and it's going to be so easy. And I tell people this all the time. It's like you created like a vase and it's
Yeah.
beautiful and you're so excited and they're like, "Oh, yes, I like it." And they smash it and they said, "Okay, now put it back together." And so
Yeah.
that's very much I think I was a little bit surprised about how much work editing your content edits are, I mean, how it is for them, but it's also you're the one having to put it back together again.
Right. And some people at that level don't even hire editors. They just do it themselves. And so there are, many methods to do that as well. When I had my editor from Red Adept send me back the notes, I got 12 pages of notes and it was pretty daunting.
Yeah.
Um, did you do some editing to your first draft before sending it off to a professional editor?
Well, I had to because it was 120,000 words. And for those of
Mhm.
you who are looking to hire a content editor, they charge by the word. So at
Yeah.
that point, I needed to get rid of about 25,000 words before I even went to the next step. And and it really did help. She suggested that I needed to cut this one chapter, even though she loved the scene. But she said you got to get your character to the heart of the story, which was in Kentucky. And I love that scene so much that I re-envisioned it, changed a few things up, and that is the epilogue of my book. And
Yeah.
I felt like with content editing, it really made me a stronger writer. They forced me to also look at it without emotion. And that's the other thing that I did with both the one that I hired and then when I got my edits back from Red Adept, our publisher. I let it stew for about a week. I did not jump into, okay, I'm going to fix it now. I think for me, I had to process that, because this book is, your writing is personal, whether, you want to admit it or not. And it's hard when someone tells you, you got to get rid of this character. You've got a big hole here. I think it's really good to step back a week before you jump into your edits.
Yeah, I would even suggest stepping back for a longer period of time if you're doing it on your own. I
Yeah.
think you need to wait at least a month. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't think about your book during that month. I would think about your book. I would take notes. Um, but I would not go back and start editing on your own for at least a month. I think that's the only way you're going to come to it with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
And there were a few methods that I used when I did my own editing. The first thing that I do after my first draft is I go through and re-outline. And sometimes that looks like, putting what each chapter is about on a note card. Sometimes it's putting it in a document. Um, but I re-outline just to make sure that the flow is good and that I don't have too many scenes that aren't needed. That really kind of helps shine a light on those things that aren't needed.
Yeah. And I also used a lot of, I know this sounds crazy, but Post-it notes around, like I had a notebook that had all of my scenes. That way I didn't necessarily, because when you get your edits, it's 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10, it's going to be in a document on your computer. It's not like the old fashioned where you're going to get it handwritten. And I wanted to be thoughtful before I started going in and messing with that document, because you don't want to, because a lot of times with content edits, you check that, yes, I approve this, or no, I don't. And so you want to keep it straight, because it
Mhm.
it looks like your manuscript is being ripped apart, and it really isn't. And so I think that keeping a notebook with little post-it notes helped me a lot.
Yeah. I use Google for that and will highlight and just make comments in the margin of things that I think I might want to move before I
Yeah.
actually move them. The other thing I do too is I never throw anything away.
Nope.
So if I'm doing my own editing and removing like full scenes or even parts of scenes, I have another document that I
Mhm.
copy and paste everything I throw away into, just in case I want to go back and use it somewhere else.
Yeah. I do the same thing. And I'm so grateful that I did that, because with my editor that I hired, she told me to get rid of this one scene. It's towards the end of my book. And one of my editor's biggest complaints when with my publisher was the lack of that exact scene. She said, I need your character. She needs to have agency. She needs to be going and looking for this other character. And I said, oh, I have that scene. And so it was great, because even though I went in and tweaked it, it wasn't as daunting as, oh my gosh, I've got to write a whole new almost chapter. I had it. So I don't ever throw out anything. I mean, it's always my
Mhm.
poor computer is probably too full of useless documents, but I don't get rid of that. So
Yeah.
the other thing about content edits, Donna, how when you did get those edits, how did you handle it? Because it is criticism, and as now looking back on it, I realize that that is really your first kind of, I'm not saying bad review, but it's the first time
Yeah.
someone's critical of your work. And don't you think
Yeah.
it kind of helps you, prepares you for when your book goes live to the world and anyone has an opinion on it.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And when I've had it, because my first book I had professionally edited twice, and I had the same reaction. I read it and thought, oh my God, they're wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. They're pulling my work apart. And I walked away for a week. And then when I came back, they were absolutely right. So,
Yeah.
that walking away piece is important.
Yeah, it is. And again, you don't have to take every edit that
Mhm.
they tell you. I mean, I would say I took probably about 90 to 95% of the edits that were recommended to me, but there were two parts that I held my ground. I kind of rewrote something, and my editor, after she reread it, she was like, "You were absolutely right, Hope." So you don't
Yeah.
have to completely give control over, this is still your manuscript. But if you're working with a publisher, you also have to respect their staff and their knowledge. I mean, they have experience.
Yeah. The other thing is too, like if you are not working with a publisher and, a professional editor, you should definitely seek out critique partners in the way of other people who are writers and exchange chapters, however that works. Sometimes it's a certain number of pages every week. Sometimes it's a chapter range. But in working with other critique partners, it kind of gives you an idea of how your readers are going to receive what you're
Mhm.
saying. And so in much the same way that you kind of, you have to respect the editors as readers, you have to
Right.
respect the critique partners. And if you have multiple of them, if a lot of them are saying the same thing, then that's really something that you have to pay attention to.
Yeah. So content editing is really the first step of editing. Then there's another level, something I really was not familiar with until it happened to me, and that would be copy and line edits. Donna, what was your experience with the copy and line edits? Because for me, I was shocked how much better it made my book.
Yeah, absolutely. So copy and line edits are, looking at the manuscript at the line level, which means looking at sentence structure, looking at word choice, tone, style. Um, and there are some things that I do frequently. Sometimes it's using a certain word or phrase that I don't even realize that I'm doing it until somebody shines the light on that. I tend to use an M dash pretty frequently. So I notice that my line editors will go and erase those or put a slash mark through them. And it's just as important with a line editor as it is with a developmental editor that fresh eyes are going on your manuscript and they'll see things that you don't, no matter how many times you read it.
Yeah, my line editor, it was funny because she towards the end of the book, my character has to go from this fictional town in Kentucky to 30A, and she's driving it. And my line editor kept saying, she can't get there if she leaves at this time for sunset. There's no way. There's no way she can make it. And I'm going, I've driven this dozens of times. I know exactly how long it takes.
Yeah.
And then I realized that after 4 years of spending time with this book, I had not named a fictional town in Kentucky. There really was a Summit, Kentucky, that was about 2.5, 3 hours north of where my character was. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I had to change the name of my fictional town. And for me, though, I was pressed. I had to turn my line edits in over a 24-hour period. And it was crazy trying to get them back to them because my publisher had to get the manuscript to the audiobook because they needed to get it narrated. And so for me, it was a crazy weekend and I was panicked because I had to rename my town. But the line editor, she was the one who picked up on those details. She's the one, or he, they're the ones that's going to pick up on you've got the wrong year. And also, I had used the word band-aid and bunt cake. Those are
Mm,
copyrighted, those are trademarked. I could not use those. I could use Tiffany, but I could not use a bunt cake. So it's
mm,
really funny the little things that my line editor found that I'd sat with that manuscript for so many years that
yeah.
she found on the first reading.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you don't have a line editor and you are looking to do edits at the line level, there are certain tools that you can get. One that I used pretty consistently early on when I was writing All That Is Sacred was Pro Writing Aid, because it'll pick up on cliches, it'll pick up on,
Mhm.
copyrighted words and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think that is very helpful. The other thing that I think is very helpful too is doing like a continuity edit, which are some of the things that Hope is talking about. The reader, the line editor coming back and pointing out to you. Um, you can kind of, with a very specific lens, go through your whole draft and only look at, a certain facet, whether it's dialogue tags or dialogue, or continuity in terms of the way that you describe your characters. So you're
Mhm.
reading through your draft only looking at that and not paying attention to anything else.
Yeah.
um, I think that is a really good way to make sure that your continuity and your style is working appropriately for you.
Yeah, and one thing that I do, and I started it doing it in my second book because I learned the hard way. When I
Mm,
go through a chapter and I finish a chapter and I'm trying to edit it, because I'm one of those perfectionists, I can't keep going. I'm not one of those that can just go and then go back. I
yeah,
listen. I use Word, and there is a voice, you can click on the voice, and if I hear it, that's when I'm like, oh, I just used that word 3 sentences ago, and things like that. So for me, listening to my words, especially with dialogue, that was very helpful. But so the last part of editing, really before your book goes out, is proofreading, and that's not something that at least we were a part of. The proofread is not something that we had our hands on.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, proofreading, again, if you don't have an editor, is something that you could use Pro Writing Aid or Grammar Girl or something like that for. With the editors that we have at Red Adept, we don't even hear back from the proofreaders unless
Mm-mm.
there's something questionable. My first book, I didn't even know when they were done proofreading, because I didn't need to change anything. But for Of Lies and Honey, I did need to change something very little. To be honest, I don't even remember what it was. But there was a question that the proofreader had, and that actually had to do with continuity. There was something that wasn't kind of jiving from the beginning of the manuscript to the end. So it's good to have as many eyes on your manuscript as you possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Donna, we're going to need to start wrapping up this episode. And as like I always love to say, you're our teacher, and can you give us our due now?
Yeah. So our due now is to try some of the techniques that we've talked about. And there are other techniques that we didn't even get into, like a backwards outline and a beat sheet and storyboarding. Um, those are on our show notes, along with some links that will talk about what each of those are and how to go about using them. Um, Try a new editing or revision method that you haven't tried yet. Try something that sounds like it would work well with your writing routine, and see how it goes for you.
Yeah. And just remember, your book really comes to life during editing. It can be painful, but
Mm,
also it can be so rewarding because you can see your story. It really transforms. It's almost like, you finally get your butterfly moment. It really does change with the right editors and also with the right mindset. You've got to go in and remember, it's a business, and I know your manuscripts are personal, but you do have to sometimes just step away from your passion of this book and look at it in a business lens. So as always, people, you guys can find us at Apple and Spotify, Amazon, Google, and YouTube. And also we have a website, www.authorstalkingbookish.com. And before we leave, Donna, what is our next episode? Because I am really getting excited about it.
Yeah, I am too. So we're having an interview with Leslie Rasmussen, who is the author of The Stories We Cannot Tell. She is also a former television writer and entrepreneur. So we're hoping that she will give us some insight to what she learned the hard way.
Okay, well, until next time, Donna.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Hope Gibbs.
And I'm Donna Norman Carbone. It's time for you to get to work.
We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks with another tip from your author friends.